Hi, friends. I'm so glad you are watching today. We're going to have a great conversation with Kirk Cameron and his new film, The Homeschool Awakening. My name is Jean Thomason, and this is Momentum Influencers Network. Super excited about this topic, homeschooling, something that's close to my family and so many of my friends. And Kirk has been involved in a brand new documentary type film that is having a theatrical release coming up really soon. Families across the nation, as we know, they certainly are here where I live in Franklin, Tennessee, experiencing a homeschool awakening. And I love what you said, Kirk, about the American families are on a mission to put faith and fun back into learning. And so this film, The Homeschool Awakening, is exploring all these things. So we want to welcome you today. We are excited to hear what you have to say about this project you've just finished. So to begin with, let's just say, what has inspired you to tackle the topic of homeschooling?
Well, Jean, thank you for having me on the program. So excited to be talking with you about this particular subject because we're at such a critical place in our nation's history. And moms and dads are waking up out of a deep slumber and really getting back into the driver's seat with regard to their kids' education, their academic education, but also their moral education and their spiritual education. Um, this really started with the pandemic, the COVID lockdowns that closed so many schools around the country, sending kids back home for a period of time. And that gave parents a front row seat. They got a peek behind the curtain and discovered that there are things that the public school system is teaching our children that are diametrically opposed to their values. They were horrified, and many of them pulled their children out of the public school system, and they're looking for hope. They're looking for options. And millions of them have discovered the wonderful world of homeschooling, and it's not what they thought it was. There's so many misconceptions about homeschooling. In fact, I had a healthy fear of homeschooling when Chelsea and I were raising our 6 kids, and we found ourselves in a similar situation. Everything was great at a little private school up until 6th grade. And then after that, the options were not good. And a friend of ours introduced us to this idea of homeschooling, which it turns out you don't have to be a Quaker. You don't have to have a head covering and churn your own butter. I live in Hollywood, California, and I make movies. Homeschooling is actually getting back to the fundamental idea of parenting, which is that God gave your children to you. And if you want to put them in a public school that is teaching them the values that you love and believe in, if you've got a school option like that, fantastic. If you've got a private school that's supporting you and what you want to teach your kids, that's terrific. Homeschooling, for many people, is turning out to be the gold standard because they get 7 to 8 hours a day with their children back. And that's time that can never be replaced. And they're able to actually explode the 4 walls of a classroom and make the entire world the school where you get to learn in community with other families and kids older than you and younger than you. And you get to write your own schedule. You get to choose curriculum and processes, lean into your kids' gifts and talents. And the freedom is mind-blowing.
What would you say? I love that. I'm so happy to hear you say that. The parents that we know and even my husband and I have said, gosh, if we had an opportunity to have a redo, we might actually really tackle this whole homeschooling world. And I've been exposed to so much of it. What would you say? And because I've watched it already, and I know, what are the stereotypes that people don't understand? You already mentioned that about not having to be a Quaker, but is there any specific thing? I'm especially thinking about the whole socialization.
Yeah, so I had those concerns too before we homeschooled our kids, and then we realized that the opposite is true. Think about it. If you want to teach your kids socialization, is the best way to do that to drop them off at a public school? I mean, think of the things that they're learning there and how they're being socialized. most of them are being socialized with all sorts of nasty things like pornography and other stuff on these things at school, among a wide variety of things from critical race theory to gender queer theory and the 1619 Project, and so many things that are actually socializing your kids in the direction you don't want them to go. I mean, how much time do you spend if your kids are in a public school system or any school system that you don't agree with, trying to undo what they're learning at school? And do you really think you can compete if your kids are 40 hours a week at this place learning bad stuff, that you've got a little time on the weekends or maybe Sunday school where they're coloring, a little cartoon of Noah's Ark? Is that really going to counteract all of the 7-hour a day discipleship that they're getting in school? What if you could reclaim all of that? Imagine if socialization was actually putting your kids in the real world from day one, learning how to deal with older people, carrying on conversations with adults, interacting with the family on a wide variety of topics, from faith to politics to everything that's going on in the news. And they're learning how to read, write, and do arithmetic as they're pursuing their passions. We've got stories of kids who have their pilot's license at 14 years old, kids who are starting businesses with their parents, and they're an essential part of that business. All of that is education. Families who are traveling to other countries and learning other languages and cultures. And it's actually a lot more affordable than you think. You're not in this little silo. You're not out in the wilderness. If you want to live in the wilderness, you can. If you want to live in the middle of a city, you can do that too. The point is, you're in charge. You decide curriculum. You choose processes. You can reclaim your family so that it begins to flourish once again. And you're doing life together with the entire world as your classroom. It's really remarkable what's going on. That's why I'm calling it the Homeschool Awakening.
I loved watching the program and the way that you chose different families who had different experiences, and they had a different family dynamic, and they had a different family structure.
Right.
And how did you go about choosing those particular families to put in your show?
Well, I know some of the families personally, others were friends of friends, and the network of homeschool families within this national community is extensive. And so it's not hard to find them. Homeschooling doubled during the COVID pandemic. And so we have millions of families who are doing this joyfully and successfully. And you may be wondering, is homeschooling really for our family? Could we ever do something like that? I mean, how does homeschooling work for working parents? What will the socialization actually be like if we homeschool our kids? And what about the academic rigor? Is it competitive with other options? Are my kids going to get into a college? What about scholarships? How do I navigate all this stuff? I've never done it before. I don't have a degree in science or math to be able to teach that stuff. All of these things are covered in the Homeschool Awakening. The ins and outs, the how-tos, and the success stories, the challenges. So I highly recommend that you get tickets and you watch it. Even if you're already homeschooling your kids, go to support and learn strategies from other homeschool families and get your questions answered. You can get tickets if you go online to kirkcameron.com. I've got a link there. You type in your zip code and your theaters will show up. It's only in theaters for only 2 days. That's Monday and Tuesday, June 13th and 14th. And many theaters have already sold out. So get your tickets online early so that you can reserve your seats. My theater's already sold out in my neighborhood. I waited too long, and so I think I'm going to have to get a ticket to Top Gun and then just walk over to the Homeschool Awakening and stand up against the wall.
That's great. I wanted to ask you a question. I thought it was beautiful the way that you pointed out a couple of things. First was that in the Constitution, specifically, the government was not given the responsibility of education, which I did not know, and that didn't happen until the 1800s. And then you took everyone to that great and beautiful statue of the Founding Fathers. Could you just touch on that for a second?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You'd think, you may ask the question, well, education's important. Shouldn't the government have a big part in education? Well, according to our Founding Fathers, they say no. Absolutely not. That was something that is so sacred, so important. The shaping of hearts and minds of children, you can't put that into the hands of the government. You keep that right there in the precious, sacred, protective cocoon of the family and the family of faith. Home schooling in America for the first 100 years was based in the home. The Bible was the primary textbook. It was supported by the church. And Noah Webster, the founding father and the father of American scholarship and education, he gave us the Webster's Dictionary, said the purpose of education is to teach children the principles of Christianity. That they're the first principles and the most important principles that they should learn. Why? Because they produce character in the individual, produces flourishing families and a free republic like ours that are based on the scriptures. So all of this stuff, all of these questions, all of these things you may be wondering about homeschooling will hopefully be answered for you, and you can explore your options together with your families if you join us in the theaters Monday and Tuesday night.
Well, I love that you said real wealth is in the family, and that was brought out in a beautiful way. We are so excited, and we hope that all our viewers are going to buy their tickets for June 13th, June 14th, the Fathom event at theaters. And then after that, hopefully it'll be in lots of places and they can share it with their friends and their families. And we thank you, Kirk, for all that you do to encourage faith and family in our nation. And this, I believe, for such a time as this, is a great, great time. And I'd had no idea that homeschooling has doubled since the pandemic. So we want to thank you.
Yeah. So many kids were sent home. Now, some of those families have their kids back in school, but many of them never sent their kids back. Wow. Not just to get away from the bad stuff, but because they discovered how much they loved being a family together, and they kept them home.
That is great. Well, thank you for being such a stellar example to so many with you and with your wife and your children. We pray God's blessings on you. And I know you have a new thing coming up about adoption. I'm very excited to see that. So we want to be part of your team to cheer you on, Kirk. God bless you. Thanks for being with us today.
Thanks, Jean. Thank you so much. God bless you too.